Welcome. I'm Gary Brock, Director of Education for KCPT, and we're so excited you're here tonight. I want to thank Michelle for that wonderful rendition. Sorry about the music, but you know, I think she did a good job, don't you? Yeah. I've got a few little things I want to say. I hope you had a chance to pick up some food and you had all of the handouts we had, the cups and stuff on the table. And make sure you do go around to the different groups that are here tonight and pick up some of their information. I would like to thank the Paseo High School Performing Arts, from Paseo Performing Arts School, the jazz band combo under the direction of John. Give him a big hand. John, you want to introduce them real quickly?
Absolutely. On piano, we have Omar Green. On bass, we have Abraham Favela. And on drum set, we have Ariane Sipes. Thank you very much for having us.
We are happy. Thank you very much for being a part of this. And then at the back of the room, I have a very special group I'd like to introduce. This is our Kansas City Public School. It's KCPS-TV, and you'll think, wait a minute, is that KCPT? But actually, it's KCPS, Kansas City Public School Television, under the direction of Justin Robinson. And I want Justin, if you can, real quick, can you kind of tell us who your kids are here tonight?
We have several kids here tonight. We have Orlando on camera over here, Chucky over there, Alexander in the middle, Jakevion, Reggie running the director's booth back here. We have Kimberly and Matthew, Michael, and Diamond. They were out there doing interviews with many of you before this event started, so we have quite a production going on here today.
Yeah. You might recognize Justin from former reporter on Channel 9. Kansas City's pretty lucky to have him to come in. And I don't know, Nick may say something about it, or Cliff may say something about it, but they're also one of our schools for the PBS NewsHour. There's only 50 in the nation, and we chose Paseo to be one of our schools. So guys, thank you. They're going to be asking questions and stuff tonight. Okay, I would like to introduce our president and CEO, Cliff Keel.
Yeah, thanks, Gary, very much, and I will be brief. It's nice to see so many friendly faces, and I'm glad such a good turnout. I want to thank the national sponsors of this effort. I think, Gary, what are we, one of 14 cities that are, 15 cities that are chosen for this outreach program. Bank of America, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's sponsors, and then locally McDonald's provided, I think, some gift certificates there, so that was very nice of them. Certainly the Bruce R. Watkins Cultural Center for hosting us this evening, and again, all the lovely folks that Gary mentioned before. You know, our station, a lot of people don't realize, and so I've always got to get a plug in there. We serve 43 school districts, over 90,000 students with our education media services. Gary and his team, Janet, he and Janet, they do all that work. I think they had over 100 education service providers at their last annual event in terms of helping train folks how to use our education media services in the classroom. We've got 24,000 hours of content we broadcast each year free over the air, and we really want to be valuable to this community, and so we'd love to hear from you. What do we need to do differently or better? We tell 700 local stories a year, and we're adding a new journalism center. We just got a nice gift to help do that, to tell more local stories. And we're adding a radio station, a music radio station, so watch for that, 90.9 FM, which is The Bridge out in Warrensburg, which we're bringing into Kansas City, and will be, you'll be able to actually hear it. You can't really hear it right now, 90.9 FM. But I was lucky enough to go to Philadelphia to the non-commercial music convention last year, and it was pretty amazing. I heard everybody from, in one afternoon, Mavis Staples gave just an amazing performance, to Tom Jones, to the French band Phoenix, And then another day, which these young folks, I wanted to mention to them, Jose James is a hip-hop jazz artist from Twin Cities, and we're going to be really working to bring all these different artists to town. We'll probably have about 2 touring acts come each week, and we really want to work with the community to get those folks out in the community and do little mini concerts and things. And also, we've already captured a number of local bands, and so we'll play a lot of local music as well. So we're excited about that, and we really look at it as a community building enterprise, and the music is kind of just the way to get folks to show up and get together. And certainly we're going to try to sneak in a little bit of information about public television and what we do. And I do want to commend Gary and Janet again on all the work they do. And KCPT folks, maybe raise your hand just real quick. They're here. Renitha and Janice. And really happy to work with all the different partners here, and glad you're here. I think this program will be amazing. I am going to have to step out in a minute, but Nick, lovely and talented Nick Haynes, will take good care of you. And yeah, we're got a lot of good things going on at the station, and please kind of check out, we've got a new website. We're doing a lot more social and digital media. All our content is available on multiple platforms. More and more programs like this, once they're released on air, they're available on pretty much every format you can name. So please take advantage of that, and I hope you enjoy tonight's program. And again, thanks for being here, and thanks for letting me have a few minutes.
Good evening. Come on, y'all do better than that. Good evening. First, I would like to thank KCPT, Gary Brock, the Watkins Center, and other groups for sponsoring this workshop and for participating in this effort to acknowledge the importance of African American history. I was born in Kansas City, Kansas, and grew up in a section known as Quindaro. Historically, Quindaro was a small town on the Missouri River, which was a stop on the Underground Railroad. Slaves escaping from Missouri would cross the river and pass through Quindaro towards freedom. A great deal of my youth was spent in my grandparents' home in Independence, Missouri, where I heard about Hiram Young. Young was so successful as a carpenter and a blacksmith that he was able to purchase his freedom and that of his wife, Matilda. And he moved to Independence in 1850 and opened up a very successful wagon-making business supplying settlers, heading west with transportation and supplies. At the height of his success, he was recognized as the richest man in Jackson County. While working with the Kaufman Scholars Program, I worked with middle school and high school students, researching and writing about the history of the 18th and Vine District. I worked with the group focusing on the history of the community. One of the more interesting characters was a young black female millionaire named Sarah Rector. Born into the Creek Nation in Oklahoma, Sarah was given a poor parcel of land upon which oil was discovered. She was able to foil attempts, such as guardianship by whites and even being subject to a new law which attempted to redefine Native Americans as white, including Sarah, just so they could get their hands in her pockets. She moved to Kansas City, married, and became an important part of the black community. I was recently granted the privilege to write the African American history curriculum for the ACE program. It allowed me to remember aspects of African American history that I'd forgotten. And it enlightened me about information I hadn't known. And it solidified my contention that the teaching of this history is still very necessary. The great philosopher George Santayana, in his treatise, Reason and Common Sense, stated, "Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it." And he encapsulated in that statement the need to study history. The griots and African societies were the keepers of the history of the people and understood that the people were a part of a kinship cycle where the importance of the ancestors was directly related to the existence of their descendants. The great historian, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, writing in his work, The Miseducation of the Negro, when speaking of the origins and long-term effects of low self-esteem, explained, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary. His definition of miseducation is one in which one's teaching and learning can be antithetical to one's expressed desire to be all that he can imagine. Educators and other social scientists have, in recent years, begun to ponder the same questions that were voiced when the study of African American history was a burning issue during the 1960s. During the Black Identity Movement, a movement where the views of African Americans centered upon our desire to define ourselves for ourselves, we rejected the white definition of who we are. We no longer accepted terms like colored or Negro and took on an identity which connected us to our African identity. We studied African culture and embodied African philosophies. We wore our nappy hair proudly and exhorted our brothers and sisters to reject the Eurocentric historical analysis about African history and discover the Afrocentric historical analysis that speaks to the inherent humanity of African people. Why is this analysis important? For centuries, African Americans have fought two distinct battles. The first battle was to gain freedom and justice in a world that fought viciously to deny them. The second, and perhaps most important, was the battle against the effort to dehumanize an entire race of people in order to control them. Slavery, which was in essence an economic system, declared that in this country, slaves were merely property. The 3-5 Compromise codified in law that slaves were only 3/5 of a person for political reasons. The entire view of slavers was stated clearly when Chief Justice Roger Taney expressed in the Dred Scott decision that blacks were so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. It was the practice of dehumanizing Africans that created the racist stereotypes which permeated American culture for centuries. It is truly pernicious when we consider the effect this process had on how African Americans viewed ourselves. Many of us remember growing up in segregated America and viewing ourselves as the other. W.E.B. Du Bois talks about a two-ness in his work, The Souls of Black Folk. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. Du Bois also posed a question that is being posed today. How does it feel to be a problem? When we examine the historical record and compare the status of African Americans historically to now, one must be cognizant of some similarities. True, anyone who says that things are not better are simply not paying attention. We are no longer slaves. We have rights and the ability to protect those rights. We have freedom and experience a level of justice that no slave ever hoped to have. We have become participants in the American experiment and have moved from the slave quarters to the White House. But we still have a deficit in our equal status as citizens. We no longer are enslaved, but there exists a new form of bondage, evidenced by increased incarceration rates for minorities. We experience increased income inequality. We see renewed disfranchisement with new and strident voter suppression laws and a backing away from voting rights, which are seen as a minority entitlement, according to Justice Scalia. We engage in an old argument about what kind of education we should offer. As W.E.B. and Booker T. discovered, all of our bases should be covered. While we no longer have minstrel shows that denigrate our people and culture, we can't deny the negative impact upon our social morality and personal identity by the images being presented by the hip-hop nation and certain rap videos. Stereotyping has become profiling. Black codes are now stop and frisk. There was a time when teaching a black child to read and write could be a hanging offense. We now seem to treat the education of our children as a privilege to be accepted or rejected instead of a necessary right to fight for at all costs. What is culture? Webster defines culture as the act of developing the intellectual and moral faculties, especially by education, and the integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior that depends on man's capacity for learning and transmitting knowledge to succeeding generations. Perhaps the most basic foundation of the African culture can be embodied in the development of the 7 principles of Ma'at. Ma'at is an African Kemetic philosophy of life that was viewed as the way of life in ancient Egypt. Ma'at represents the divine order of the universe and is considered a standard of rightness in behavior and moral living. The 7 principles of Ma'at include order. Order is considered the first principle because no good or nothing is possible without order. No matter what the situation or activity, order is paramount for the establishment and the guarantee of right conduct. Truth. One must speak truth and do truth, with an emphasis on openness, honesty, authenticity, and trust. Justice. Justice is seen as personal, individual liberty and social expectations and needs, with an emphasis on fairness, flexibility, and protection. Righteousness. Righteousness requires accountability, acknowledgement, ownership and responsibility for one's actions, and the desire to restore or reconcile the loss of order, with an emphasis on being complementary, accountability, responsibility, and gratitude. Propriety and reciprocity acknowledges that the most fundamental form of human desires are happiness and affection. Out of the need for affection and happiness, an emphasis was placed on the doing to others what is right, and this developed into the human qualities of compassion, empathy, caring, and belonging. Balance. Balance refers to the state or condition whereas all elements or components are in equilibrium, with an emphasis on stability, equality, and fairness, harmony. Harmony acknowledges the importance of order, balance, rhythm, as the young lady showed in her dance. The rhythm was in her. And equality and fairness and cooperation, reinforcement, resonance, and encouragement. Now, any study of African American history must acknowledge the importance of these principles in our survival and advancement after slavery ended. One can look at the history of the African American community and see these principles in the development of our enduring institutions. Our entire history is a story of how truth was spoken to deny the power of the lies told about us. Our struggle has been based upon an undeniable demand for justice. Our sense of righteousness, based in religious as well as secular pursuits, always demanded that accountability and responsibility went hand in hand with progress. Because our history, we know that propriety and reciprocity with emphasis on empathy, caring, and belonging are the ingredients necessary for a love of self and others in our communities. We know that we must have balance in our lives. Our culture requires a belief in stability, equality, and fairness. We have always sought harmony in our personal and communal lives, focusing on cooperation, resonance, and encouragement. We have always demanded a system of order in our communities. We were aware that a lack of order led to chaos, and we know that our survival and advancement depended upon the orderly pursuit of freedom and justice. These principles point us to what was completed and what is yet to complete. I have concerns when black life is held so cheaply that violence is becoming the status quo in our communities. I have concerns when I hear young people define themselves and others as they once again add a color to an insult. I have concerns when systems continue to miseducate our students and then socially promote them with no accountability from students, parents, or systems. I fear the abdication of strong moral and cooperative leadership in our community that allows for areas of persistent mediocrity to pose as real advancement or accomplishment. If we are to continue to advance, we must not forget those things which allowed us to defeat the horrors of our past. We must teach our history so that our children will know who they are. For it is certain that who we are and who we hope to be is directly related to who we were. Thank you.